In 1726, Mary Toft, a peasant woman from Surrey, decided that being a field hand was a bit too much work and that a career in biological performance art was much more lucrative. Mary was poor, illiterate, and living in a world that didn't offer many exits for someone of her situation. So she created her own. She claimed that while working in a field, she was startled by a rabbit, and now in a normal world, you just have a brief moment of surprise, oh, a rabbit, and move on with your day. But Mary claimed her body had changed. She developed an intense craving for rabbit meat, followed by a series of agonizing pains. Specifically, she began giving birth to pieces of cats and eventually entire rabbits. Now, I know what you're thinking. A doctor would look at human producing a mammal from a completely different taxonomic bracket and say, Madam, that is biologically impossible, and please leave my office. But 18th century medicine was less about science and more about vibes, powdered wigs, and a desperate need to be famous. Mary's local obstetrician, John Howard, didn't just witness these births. He documented them with enthusiasm of a man that thought he'd just found a golden ticket. He claimed to have delivered nearly 20 or so rabbits in a single month. He was so convinced that he started sending letters to the greatest medical minds in England, inviting them to witness the miracle of a God's creation, or as we call it today, a massive scam. Now, word of this biological anomaly reached the ears of King George I, and because the king was apparently just as bored as everyone else in 1726, he sent his local man midwife, John Mowbray, to investigate. Now, Mowbray was already a legend in the medical community, mostly because he believed in, how should I say it, a maternal impression. The idea that if a pregnant woman looked at a funny picture or a startled animal in this case, her baby would come out looking like the object. Mowbray arrived, saw Mary produce a literal hopload of bunny parts, and instead of checking for a hidden pocket, he concluded, yes, this checks out. She is a human hutch. He was so proud of his discovery that he published pamphlets about it. He thought he was the forefront of the new medical frontier, while in reality he was just the world's most educated fool. Soon Mary was moved from her small village to London for a residency at a high-end bathhouse. She became a national celebrity. People stopped eating rabbit stew overnight. The industry collapsed because nobody wanted to accidentally eat a distant relative of Mary's offspring. The medical community was in uproar, split between the believers, who thought nature had simply broken its own rules, and the skeptics, who actually understood how many holes a rabbit has compared to a human. Now, London's elite flocked to her bedside. They watched, they waited, and they poked. Mary was under 24-hour surveillance, yet the rabbits kept coming. It was a masterpiece of commitment. She was effectively preloading the merchandise using a method that I'm sure was as uncomfortable as it was illegal. She can transform her own body into a warehouse for a prank that had gone way, way too far. The void in Mary's story finally appeared when a porter at the bathhouse was caught red-handed. He wasn't trying to steal anything. He was trying to smuggle a very much alive, a very much external rabbit into Mary's room. It turns out the miracle required a steady supply of livestock. When the porter cracked under pressure, the medical experts suddenly grew a backbone. They realized that if this was a hoax, they were going to be a laughingstock of Europe. They moved Mary to a more secure location and told her that if she didn't produce another rabbit soon, they would perform a painful experimental surgery to see exactly how her internal rabbit factory was constructed. Now, facing a prospect of being dissected while still alive, Mary suddenly had a change of heart. and a change of species. She confessed to everything. There was no maternal impression, there was no miracle. There was just a high-risk scam designed to get a royal pension. She could try to fake it until she made it, but significantly more thorough than your average Silicon Valley entrepreneur. The fallout was spectacular. The doctors who supported her saw their careers die in a slow, agonizing death, buried in a shallow grave of rabbit droppings and public ridicule. They were mocked in the newspapers, depicted in satirical prints by William Hogarth, and became the literal definition of medical incompetence. Mary, on the other hand, went to a prison for a few months for being a wild cheat and imposter, which honestly seems like a light sentence for making the entire British government look like a bunch of bunny fools. Mary Toft died in 1763, but her legacy remains as proof that if you're going to lie, you should lie so big that the king has to send a guy in a wig to check your pockets for carrots. It's a chilling reminder of the intellectual void of sorts, where people would rather believe in a biological impossibility than admit they've been conned by a peasant with a plan. Now, if you enjoyed this trip into the darkest corners of medical history, hit that subscribe button. I'm going back to my lab to mix a scent that smells like lavender and, let's say, common sense. Something Mary's doctors clearly lacked. See you in the next shadow.